it's important that black women understand that we need each other. Black men and women need each other. And you're being set up to be, and you're enjoying, because some of them are mad at black men. Mm-hmm. Some of them have some unresolved anger at black men. Some of them have come up with this phrase, male privilege, that they throw black men under in that category, which is a problem. Because if you're so privileged, why you keep getting murdered every 5 minutes in this country, and why you the least to feel comfortable enough to be in the academy to stay, and why are you over incarcerated? Those are not the tenets of privilege. But we live in a society that not only glorifies white maleness, but that constantly puts down black maleness. And now we have women who have learned to do things that put them on the side of white men. And everybody's ignoring black men and being rewarded, the black women being rewarded for it.
It's evident that he cares. What do you care about? Welcome to the Rock Newman Show. It's the Rock Newman Show.
The Minister of Wellness Ministries and Rock Newman Show 2.0 return to the nation's capital Saturday, September 16th, 2023, Union Temple Baptist Church. This is your final opportunity to join us in person before the official start of the viral outbreak season. To get empowered to quickly lose weight, reverse disease, so you can be 100% confident your immune system is ready for anything that may come. Come hungry, because delicious plant-based soul food and desserts will be available by DC's own Dr. Ruby Lathan. Space is extremely limited, so RSVP as soon as possible at theministerofwellness.com under Health Seminars. That's theministerofwellness.com under Health Seminars. Please call or text 888-847-8026. That's 888-847-8026.
Thank you for joining us for another segment of Rock Newman Show 2.0. I'm always honored that you are tuning in, that you are spreading the word. I'll ask you to continue to do the same. Subscribe, like us, and help us grow. I am unapologetic from this corner of the world here at 1918 Martin Luther King Avenue at WEAC Studios to have an opportunity to speak truth to power and to have on guests who are also unapologetic about speaking truth to power. They often do it in a more erudite manner than I do, and that's why they're the guests and I'm just the host. Nevertheless, thank you so much for joining us. I have one of my favorite guests, and I'd have him more if his calendar allowed it. But his name is Cleo Manago. Welcome to the Rock Newman Show. Again, thank you so much.
Good to see you, Rock. Good to see you.
Okay, I am going to do something, Cleo. Ever so often, I call Cleo after he has made we're Facebook friends, after he's made a Facebook post. And those of you who haven't seen him here yet, excuse me, he's self-identified as a trance breaker and social architect. Now, in our discussions just before the cameras turned on, he made mention that he's putting together an event somewhere in Virginia. I think he'll probably be specific and tell us where. That is an the event is an invitation for men and women to gather, for men and women to gather. For what?
Well, it's my perspective that there's a lot of sources or forces, if you will, in this society throughout my life, but particularly in contemporary society, that are dividing black men and women. There's a lot of people who are well known, who are not loving somebody else black, and the media itself is constantly showing black people finding other people more appropriate or more as better choices than black people. And there's a straight up conspiracy, if you will. I don't like that word because it has mixed meanings, but it's a fact that it's almost impossible to find a black on black love story or black on black affection in one of the most powerful mediums in the world, which is the media. And I've seen, walking down the street and interacting with the community as I do on a weekly basis, the impact of this divide that's building between black men and women. One of the ways that I'm going to try to deal with that or resolve that is at the Alkebulan Oasis and Retreat Center in Virginia. At the end of November, we are going to be having a retreat summit that's for black men and women that's built around identifying these divisions, showing positive role models of black on black love, black men and women loving each other, and getting a conversation that's intentional around learning to recognize the landmines in the society that's against black on black love and trying to celebrate it and strategically mend the divide. And it's going to be in late August. If people are interested, we're still planning it, so we don't have the exact date yet, but if you're interested, you can reach us at Alkebulan 2024 at gmail.com.
You're probably going to have to spell that out.
I was getting ready to do that. Alkebulan is one of the original names of the place that the Italians got us calling Africa. And Alkebulan is spelled Alkebulan. And it's the Alkebulan Oasis and Retreat Center. It's in Virginia. And we're excited. We just came from a retreat that we had with black men about 3 weeks ago where we did a lot of work around healing black men, unpacking the struggles of being a black man in society, and learning to create some unification and self-evaluation and some proactive black affirming behavior so we can kind of get rid of some of these issues that we're facing as black men.
Let's stay there for a second. I'm going to go here. You shared a post, and it is a photo of the handsome Harry Belafonte and the beautiful and the beautiful Eartha Kitt.
Yes.
And it said, Eartha Kitt stated in her autobiography about her encounter with Harry Belafonte, getting up from my bed, he said, I don't want you to take this too seriously. No black woman can do anything for me.
Well, you starting off, see, you trying to mess with people. Okay.
And you say what?
Well, I think my comment there was that black people who are fighting for black power, equity, and protection, and black people who are fighting for easier access to whiteness are two different animals.
Do me a favor.
Sure.
Say that again for the people in the back who can't hear real well.
Okay, people in the back. Black people who are fighting for justice, for the protection, defense, and power of black people is a different animal than a black person fighting for better access to white folks. Now, on the surface, it looks the same because everybody got a sign, stop racism, and everybody's black. It looks like a whole crowd of people who are caring for black people, but that's not necessarily true. Because the black people who are fighting for access to whiteness are inadvertently for a fight to be involved in anti-blackness. Because whiteness is an anti-black campaign. So it's important, instead of me just simply critiquing Harry Belafonte, people can come to their own conclusions by looking at this from a logical perspective. As I mentioned before, I'll say it one more time. There's a difference between fighting for black power like Malcolm X did, like Marcus Garvey did, because Marcus Garvey, if Eartha Kitt was in the bedroom with Marcus Garvey or Malcolm X, she wouldn't have heard that comment.
Yeah.
She would have. We saw who both of them loved,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't have said nothing like that. But somebody who can't wait to get the white folks, but who looks like they care about black folks to the naive eye, would think that everybody was fighting for the same thing, but it's not true.
So let me ask you this. It just makes me this. Just the thought that comes to mind. And I'm going to examine it, man. I don't mean to be too hard on you, make life too difficult for you, but. You see Al Sharpton, who is characterized as black leader, mainstream media.
That's what mainstream, which is means white, has said about Al Sharpton.
Say it again.
You said the term mainstream media, which is code for white.
Okay, yeah.
It says about Al Sharpton.
Correct. Right. And Al speaks a language that is for that I'm sure that he would put a stake in the ground and say that I'm fighting for black liberation. Now, at the same time, he is an MSNBC host, commentator, and all of those things, and now a regular guest at the White House dinners. So, are we looking at a split personality there, or what are we looking at when we look at Al Sharpton?
Well, I hope this contrast makes sense. Have you ever heard of Dr. Thomas Curry?
Yes.
Brilliant scholar, one of the most brilliant deconstructionists of the black experience politically and historically on the globe. But most people don't know who he is. My point in mentioning that to you, and I'll go back even further in terms of looking at the legacy of this tendency. Remember Dr. Frances Cress Welsing?
Absolutely.
One of the most brilliant psychologists that ever graced the earth, and that's not just me talking. If you look at her work scientifically and from a psychological perspective, even from an erudite perspective, she was amazing.
Who the mainstream media tried to do all they could to demonize her and to make her look like a straight up kook.
That's my point. My point is that people who actually are good for black people, who are actually what I call trance breakers, people that can awaken us up from the trauma trance, and who has information that could actually transform, empower us, and teach us to behave in ways that mean and makes it clear that we respect and want to defend ourselves, are marginalized. People who they constantly lift up are either neutral, I call them decoys. They are people that they lift up so we can have the imagery of alleged inclusion, who are going to change nothing. And that's why they keep them around for a long time. I mean, some people have been around in those positions for a long time because they need them for a long time until they find somebody else, and they are decoys. Because people who are actually really have the skills and some strategies to move black people in a place of empowerment and protection don't get to be on MSNBC all day long and all these other places. And they're not invited to the White House. I mean, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, and I mentioned Welsing and Dr. Curry because sometimes they call them kooks, but these people went through the regiment of the academy. PhDs. Yeah. Dr. Welsing had 2 PhDs. And Dr. Curry is amazing and a scholar and can break down anything from a scientific or from a so-called formal level, but they are marginalized because they have something to give us that would advance us. So I hope all that answers your question.
Yeah, and Dr. Frances Cress Welsing dealt with the bigger issue.
That's right.
Overarching issue.
That's right.
Of white supremacy.
White supremacy mythology. I have to add the word mythology to it.
Yes.
Because it ain't real.
Yeah, because it ain't real. That's right.
True. It's a house of cards.
Yeah. Okay, now with that being said, I'm on your Facebook page.
I see.
Yeah. And you posted something from a Howard University graduate named Stokely Carmichael. And he said Dr. King's major assumption was that if you are nonviolent, if you suffer, your opponent will see your suffering and will be moved to change his heart. That's very good. He only made one fallacious assumption. In order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. Now, that's explosive.
Yeah.
Comment on it, please.
Well, in short, you can't kill Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland, we can go on and on, and kill. George Floyd is the most famous one at this point. There's just been many. You can't just kill innocent people who don't have guns and who are not violent towards you.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
Because I think also a most classic example is something that happened in New York on the subway.
Neely.
Where he got killed. And the knee-jerk reaction from the white community was let's support this guy that killed him and raised millions of dollars for his defense. Before all the facts really come, the facts we knew, black man dead, killed by a white man, they were sending money in so quickly that no one could have possibly had the facts. But the reaction was defend this whiteness and a lack of concern, empathy, compassion for the dead victim, the dead black man.
Like Stokely said, you have to have a consciousness. They don't. I mean, that's an excellent contrast to make the point that you just made. And even when Zimmerman murdered Trayvon, he got almost $2 million that came to him in his defense. But the word fact is a relative term. Facts are relevant to your subjective interest. The facts are that a white man killed a black man and was therefore at risk for being imprisoned for doing something that's patriotic. Killing black men is a patriotic act. So from their factual perspective, he needs to be defended and protected. Now, that's not just you and I talking. You just got finished mentioning that the millions came rolling in immediately, but I'm only putting another spin on the term facts. They had enough facts to start donating. He killed a young white male, and he was going to be in trouble for that in theory, and we have to defend him.
Yeah, he killed a young black man.
Yeah, he killed a young black man, and we have to defend the white man who did something that's really, really, really just, depending on your agenda. If you're concerned about black people not being strong, not being focused, not being resistant, and you have to make sure that the message is you don't matter. He matters. Because one of the things I think we should talk about at some point is not simply the redundancy of white consciencelessness, if you will, looking at Stokely's comment. We should look at our paralysis. See, that's what concerns me. Because we could have sent, not that this is the answer, but we could have sent some millions too. Right. But there's a paralysis. One thing I mentioned to you earlier that I experienced again, and I experienced it a million times, when I'm around grown black folks, some who are very academically accomplished, if you will, or who work in the mental health field, they'll complain about racism, and particularly if there's kids around, they'll go, there was this white person that this, and I'm like, wait, why are you whispering? And my point is that there's a logic, behavioral paralysis that is put in place by trauma unresolved in this society that keeps black people from operating in ways that match the kind of support that the white dude got. See, if we were awake and we were thoughtful about the conditions that we live in, we would not sit and wait for him to raise $3 million. We would support the brother's family. But we think twice about it. It's like we whisper. Grown folks whispering the word white because we don't want to offend whiteness, disembodied whiteness. Because wasn't no white folks nowhere around, but they still were whispering because the whiteness isn't here. The whiteness that's in the white mind is putting money in the hands of people who they feel like are in trouble. The whiteness in the black mind keeps us paralyzed and not doing anything. He got about $2,000 or something like that. I mean, it wasn't that much.
So there's a real big question I have, and your answer makes me ask it right now. You as someone who is a student of the mind, mm-hmm. Why do so many black folks have the overwhelming propensity to behave in a way that doesn't make white folks uncomfortable? Now, I know that might take up the rest of the show. I don't care.
I'm trying to find. Okay, I'm gonna attempt to do this in an abbreviated manner. The first memory that I have as a child, in terms of something that was powerful and iconic, was Jesus.
Okay.
Going to church. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned in previous conversations, I, like a lot of black people I run into, were raised to, baby, go to school, get your education, go to college, go to church, and get a good job. That's the curriculum. Mm-hmm. Nothing in it about be a critical thinker. We are admitting to you that there is a I usually call it I can't think of the word I used to use it. I just say there's a contamination, a corruption. That's the word. There's a human corruption in your midst called white supremacy mythology, racism, that you're bound to run into, baby. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure you're prepared to look at it for what it is and be able to critically analyze it and recognize it, so it won't. Its slings and arrows and its agenda will not be internalized in you, and you won't wind up being anti-black. That should be part of the curriculum, except this thing. But the white Jesus part is deep, because the white Jesus myth, like Santa Claus and the rest of the myths they come up with, has us thinking on an unconscious basis that is sacrilegious to counter or to defy whiteness, that is against God. Now, this is not a conversation that's articulated. It doesn't have to be. If you go to church in this country and see white Jesus up there all the time, and you watch television, including The Simpsons or Disney, whatever you watch, and you see Jesus with God with lightning bolts on the chair and he's white, that's the perpetual image we have in our mind. And one of the things...
And a Fox News host saying, of course Jesus was white.
But the issue is, we're whispering, if we say it at all in too many cases, a counter-narrative. There's no counter-narrative. So a black child typically goes from baby to adult with the implications that you're outside of the grace of God because you're black. So since you're outside of the grace of God because you're black, this is your destiny. All this trouble you're going through is your destiny. And just be glad that you have a job, an education, and can go to church, because that's a blessing. That's the term they use a lot. But all that goes back to we've been put in that spell and that trance before you were born, before I was born, since the enslavement of us, when they took away the drums and took away all of the African sensibilities that had us into another mindset. White folks knew, okay, get rid of them drums, get rid of that stuff, make anything that's African symbolic illegal, and kill folks who insist, so we can traumatize them into paralysis so we can control them. Right now, when you look at the media, and I make the contrast because it's true, like I said all the time, it's difficult amidst all of these unarticulated challenges to our logic to find a love story. I mention that a lot, because if you hearing the N-word and sit your black ass down, all these anti-black implications all the time, and never see black love, you're set up to be in paralysis and to think twice about defending black people. And even, I'll close with this, which might get on people's nerves, but even the Black Lives Matter mantra was for white folks. Please let us matter. Mm-hmm. Please recognize us as human. Now I imagine you, don't need their recognition to know I'm human. I'm not asking them for nothing.
Right.
My perspective was, in terms of what we should have on our t-shirt, along with just loving ourselves and our own images, what's wrong with y'all? Why y'all tripping? Why y'all keep doing this crazy stuff that y'all do? Throw it back on them. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Make them reflect on the madness that they perpetuate and ask them to break it down in terms of, why are you doing this? What's up? But that's, even then, that should be where we stop. We should leave them alone, let them answer the question, and go back to rebuilding black people and repairing black people and teaching black people to come out of the trauma trance that keeps us paralyzed.
You talk about the black folks trauma trance, and the example you just gave about Black Lives Matter, that's a big for validation or something like that. I don't know if you characterize it as well as I should.
A moment ago, you mentioned people whose name I won't repeat because you already said it, in terms of who gets on TV and who gets profiled.
Yeah.
And even that movement got a lot of profile. See, white people get to say, no, you're not going to be profiled. No, Don Lemon, you're fired. No, Tavis Smiley, you're fired. So on, so on. So you're fired. You're going. They get to get. They're the ones who get to do that. When they let you in, it's because they see a way that they can use it, and that is going to keep the paralysis, that's the term I use, keep the lack of logic and proactive behavior at bay. If we let these people, because nothing about that movement affirmed black men, for one thing.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's a good fringe benefit in terms of lifting something up that they know it's not going to unify black people. That's a whole another thing. But I just want to underscore the central theme here is what gets profiled and become iconic and what gets marginalized. You understand? And what gets profiled is part of the agenda of keeping black people in the paralysis state.
Behavior emanating from racism by the racist is a form of insanity.
I would say so.
How can that, how is it best to address that insanity? Because in order for white folks not to be racist, that takes a whole lot of introspection and understanding of themselves and of their history. And I'll give an example. I had an incident where I was involved in a program where one of the participants made a couple of racist comments. I went to the people who were in charge of the program and said, here's what happened. Here's how it made me feel. I spent a lot of money as a participant in this program, and I'm not going to continue in it with that person feeling as if they have a license to do it, not get addressed. So they got all the reason to believe that they can behave like that going forward. So it got resolved. I had to be very aggressive. I told someone who I had momentarily befriended, a white guy, about what happened. Now, he almost had a heart attack trying to say, well, Rock, let me play devil's advocate. Now,
I probably wasn't hard for him to do.
Yeah, I know it was clearly, and I had defined it. And any body of intelligence, there's supposed to be a lot of intelligent people that was participating in this program, would understand how goddamn racist what that guy did was. He had such a need to say to me, well, let me play devil's advocate for a moment, and maybe it wasn't racist. Maybe he thought, he came up, and so finally I said, why do you have the need? Why do you have the need to say that maybe it was? How about accepting my assessment that it was racist? And it was so extraordinarily difficult for him to do. Why do you think that was?
The myth of white supremacy at this date, and even back in the day, is a delusional intoxicant that people with inferiority complexes need to get up in the morning. That's a very simplistic way to say that white supremacy mythology at its basis is a fight against the mediocrity that lies in the laps of whiteness.
So it is rooted, that white superiority mindset and behavior is rooted in inferiority.
An inferiority complex. For example, have you been to Kemet or so-called Egypt?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, go. Mm-hmm. But back in the day, and this is kind of a philosophical analysis. I've been, and I've seen the pyramids, etc., which have been built with the involvement of Africans. And when you go there, it's obvious. It's obvious. You go in the tombs, there they are. People who knew them made their images, but you see the same people on television in our country. They look like Tom Cruise. But anyway, you go there, they're right there, Rock, right there, black as that chair.
Yeah.
Just imagine. And the Kemetic people, the so-called Egyptian, were amazing. They were beautiful, they were colorful, they were spiritual, they were perfectionists. They had mastered a culture that was just off the chain. Just imagine, and the so-called pyramids had lime on them, and it gleamed. Now this imagine coming from the caves of Europe, where they were still figuring out what to do with their feces. And it wasn't even called Europe yet, and taking a boat and going over the ocean and coming upon this and going, damn, this exists? Now, what you do know when you mention Alexander the Great and the Hyksos and these other people, that they actually saw it and that they wanted to have it. They had to have it. And even today, and you know a lot about this, and even in United States of America, what black people produce, they have to own it. They have to control it, because then they feel like they're relevant. Or they are making some kind of impact that takes them out of the class of simply mediocre. But at least I'm controlling these fools who are magicians. So even Alexander the Great and people like his peers, when they came over the horizon and saw West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, they felt inferior. They felt challenged, and they resented it. And we've been dealing with their resentment. Haiti is one of the more most contemporary examples of their behavior. You know, France gets several millions of dollars from Haiti.
Yes.
Yearly.
Yes.
Haiti is the most phenomenal counter-white supremacy, revolutionary people in the Western world among Africans. And they successfully, and that's a whole nother story that I know, that I'm a witness to, in terms of how they did what they did and how voodoo played into it, and how resisting Christianity and Catholicism and all they had to do with them having enough focus to win, and they won.
Against
the French, against Napoleon.
Yes.
When I was a kid, I was raised, and Napoleon was undefeated.
Yeah.
Oh no, the Haitians
kicked his ass. And,
to say the least.
Yeah.
That's a nice way of putting what happened to the Haitian, to the French under Haitians' power. But as you probably already know, getting back to the narrative, Thomas Jefferson heard about the Haitian Revolution and said, don't tell these Negroes about this. He literally put out the call to all the people who ran the narrative back then and said, don't tell them. And a lot of us still don't know. But the point is that revolution was successful, and it is thrown out of the narrative. Are you familiar with the Citadel?
In
Haiti?
Yeah. Yes.
Most people don't know nothing about the Citadel.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't realize how amazing what Africans and Haitians created exists. But all this is saying is that the bottom line is that the narrative is controlled. The lack of us knowing the truth and the reality, with white Jesus being the superstar of the whole trance, keeps us in a state of questioning our value compared to whites. That's what's happening in Haiti. I mean, if they valued themselves with clarity, they wouldn't send them nothing. But it's heavily Catholic. So until we put so-called Christianity, and I'm not an atheist. When I give this narrative, people think, "Oh, no, I'm not." There's no way in the world I can be an atheist. There's too much spiritual facts in my life for that to occur. But my frame of reference for spiritual expression is not King James. But that's who most of my people are trained by, is King James. So I go back to that because that's the anchor that keeps us behaviorally distracted and disoriented and paralyzed, because we don't want to be sacrilegious and hurt Jesus' feelings because he's white.
And so some people call the example of the white Jesus and Christianity the greatest story ever told. Some say it's the greatest lie ever told. So part of what I think I'm hearing you say is that example, you're a trance breaker, but that example, that biblical, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, white Jesus in the Middle East is the root.
It's one of the roots. Another root that's equally as important is trauma. You know, the psychological impact of unresolved trauma on the black body and mind. I mean, those of us who have studied the lynching periods and the enslavement and the condition that we experience, it's mind-boggling. You know, it defies human consciousness, even when you witness it, to actually take it in, because it's so bizarre and it's so outrageously horrific. And there's been some things that have happened to us in this country that's all been documented. Every time black people have collectively successfully built a metropolis or a system of care and commerce for each other, it was literally destroyed.
Speaking of Tulsa, where there's recently a judge dismissed the case for reparations of a community that was decimated.
Yes. So
out of that comes some of the trauma that you're talking about.
Out of witnessing it. See, we're too traumatized to be offended. There's some of us like you and I, you know, and others who are offended, but the rest of us are shopping or praying or doing something else. We're distracted with other means to survive the torture instead of resolving the torture. But we should be up in arms about what happened with that sister from Tulsa. We should be up in arms about, I've always said, and I don't want to sound like I'm being redundant or speaking around in a circle, but I always said that Haiti should be our Israel. We should donate money and support Haiti, which is a symbolic and human embodied revolution against our oppression. Right there, we should celebrate those people and help as a people minimize their poverty. But anyway, getting back to the immediate point, the bottom line is when they give Jordan Neely's murderer $3 million, when they don't give reparations to a living witness to the murders that happened in so-called Black Wall Street, when they let the murders of Philando Castile and all these people off, they're recreating a narrative of black life devaluing, which is why, in my opinion, we can embrace, and this is all unconscious. See, a lot of what black people do is not conscious. It's all based on generational, habitual, and copying what we see traditionally without breaking it down. But when we see all these implications that we have less value, that makes us at risk to be asking white folks, please let us matter. Because when you ask them to let you matter, you're making them superior. And there's people among them who like that. You mentioned a story about this white man who needed you to not listen to yourself and not have your own analysis, but say, it's not true, it's not true, it's not true. Well, saying that it's true, keeping affirmative action in place, etc., keeps the irritant in place of we are a problem. Our behavior is problematic because their perspective is our behavior is necessary because we want to survive and we want to keep the illusion of our greatness in place because it's our crack. We need it.
Yeah.
We need it. We need to defy you and your logic and say you're wrong because I do not want to, in the final analysis, be a mediocre devil.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep the narrative going and get rid of everybody or anybody who's going to defy that, like critical race theory. You're familiar with critical race theory, right?
Oh, yes.
And it came to the federal level as policy. Now, even though a kindergarten can hear a story about an LGBT history, they can't hear about the residual effect of something like critical race theory in elementary schools. That's because one group has power and whiteness beholding it, called the LGBT community, and one community is just as valuable to the human story, but trapped in paralysis to demand too trapped in paralysis to demand respect, and to teach their children to demand respect. And then we got white Jesus, among other things, keeping it in place. And the marginalization of people like Dr. Francis Welsing and Dr. Marimba Ani. Have you heard of, excuse me, speak English. Have you ever heard of Dr. Marimba Ani? Or Urugu?
So. I don't think so. Oh, Urugu, yes.
Urugu.
Urugu, yes.
Urugu,
yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Marimba Ani wrote this text called Urugu that from a scientifically evaluated perspective deconstructs whiteness as a problem among the human experience. So instead of bringing those types of texts and realities into the center of our lives, whiteness is, remember, what's his name, something, who's on the Republican, Mick, what's his name? The pub with the glasses. McConnell.
McConnell. Uh-huh.
McConnell.
Mitch McConnell,
yes. Yeah. Mitch McConnell, you got to give it to him. He's a soldier for white supremacy methodology. He was one of the main people that said no critical race theory, nothing that's going to be institutionalized in this country. And he has whatever your governor's name. What's his name?
DeSantis.
DeSantis, and the governor of
the Florida governor. Not my governor.
Well, the bottom line is that all these people are not playing. They're very serious about pushing back the truth about whiteness in the world and getting rid of all challenges to it on a policy level from Congress to elementary school. Like, no. We need this myth.
And Clarence Thomas is a soldier in that campaign.
Yeah. But I have to put a but on it because Clarence Thomas is not only the victim of redundant white supremacy mythology and white Jesus, but he's also the consequence of our neglect resulting from our paralysis.
Explain.
For example, and I hope I got enough Steve to put this all together. I've talked to you before about, when Dylan Roof, and I think something similar happened I know something similar happened over generations, but I'm bringing Dylan Roof to make a point about something that we've done for generations. When Dylan Roof shot those 12 people and murdered 9, I happened to be on a tour across the country to talk at mental health conferences focused on black mental health. And you heard me say this before, I asked the audience, it was hundreds of them when I was in St. Paul, I was when the trip started, St. Paul, Minneapolis. I said, how many of you heard about Dylan Roof? They all raised their hands. And I'm gonna abbreviate what happened to make the point. I asked the parents for permission to ask their children a question, and they gave me permission. I said, babies, have you ever heard of Dylan Roof? And many of them had heard of Dylan Roof. And I said, okay, parents, did any of you take your child to the side and ask them how they're doing and check in with them and ask them how that horror, black people being murdered in the church, impacted their spirit, impacted their minds? And the majority of them had not.
Yeah.
So if Clarence Thomas or the equivalent of Clarence Thomas, was sitting in the context, which is the United States of America, hearing all kinds of anti-black implications, the N-words. I'm talking about from black people. I'm not talking about white folks yet who are being redundantly white. I'm talking about black people who are being ironically white affirming inadvertently. Sit your black ass down, act your age, not your colors, N-words ain't shit.
Yeah.
All these words you're hearing, and then white Jesus. It's a whole war on black mental health that's not being called a war. It's being called destiny. So that's neglect. That's child abuse. It's not on purpose, but it is.
But it's real.
But it's real. And the paralysis is a consequence of all of the terror that we've gone through, people being quartered and cut in half and hung and stuff like that. But we have to deal with the trauma or we're not going to ever get beyond this. And now, because it's the pus is seething because we've not addressed the wound in so long, we've really lost our minds these days. And now, in the midst of an old wound that's still flowing with pus, we have a media that's teaching us that loving each other is not the right choice. Look at Serena. Look at all the people that get to be stars on CNN. Look at all these black people chasing white people. There's an uninterrupted mantra that makes us think twice about the idea of supporting a murdered, innocent Jordan Neely,
Yeah.
or or even defying the likes of Clarence Thomas, because we're in question. White supremacists are not in question about their agenda to keep the house of cards going. They're real awake. They're real involved. We are. I don't know if I should. These white
You
people.
should. You should. Yeah. You said you don't know if you should. Whatever. You didn't know if you should. You should.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
We should teach our children that they're valuable, and that they're worthy of love, and that they are worthy of protection, and that they're worthy of defense, and that them being murdered and killed is wrong. And I see your guard dogs are acting like we should act in the presence of white supremacy mythology.
There you go.
They ain't having it.
They ain't having it.
And we shouldn't be having it either.
Yeah.
Particularly with our children. Because our children, I'm telling you, I just did a retreat summit about 4 weeks ago with a bunch of young people, and they think liberation is, well, I get to wear lipstick and I get to say, well, I'm a man or a woman despite how I was born, and that's power. And I have to say, what's powerful about it? Power means that you actually have control of your destiny. Does that give you control of your destiny? Or control or max factor? I mean, who's controlling you?
Folks, as I'm doing this show here today, in no way, shape, form, or fashion do I have intentions of any way depressing you or for this show to be a downer. We just simply are talking about some things that are extraordinarily relevant. That if we don't try to get some understanding of what's beneath so much of the oppressor's behavior and our own behavior, it is just going to continue like a Ferris wheel that goes round and round and round and round, and nothing ever happens.
Or changes.
And to that end, Cleo, there was something, I saw something recently that talked about the impact of black women on the electorate, and where it was of high praise for the role that black women played. It talked about the role of black women taking their positions and making a difference in these elections. And it talked about the black woman's history in America. And part of that history was having zero bodily autonomy, that they were a piece of property to be used by the white master, his wife, or whoever might have been involved that was in power. And that happened for hundreds of years. So, as a trance breaker, as a behavioral scientist, can you address what today that impact 200 and 300 years ago has today?
You ain't easy, Rock Newman. And what concerns me, frankly, and I'm going to answer the question, is the voluminous, how voluminous the answer to that is.
Yeah.
And how I can get in trouble because I don't have time to break it down the way I would like to from an instructional standpoint. But I'll just say this and hopefully don't get in too much trouble. It sounds good to the ear and among black women to hear that we are impacting U.S. politics. We are part of why Biden is in office. We are part of why the vice president is a black woman, and I don't have enough time to do all the quotes that I want to do on that one. Look what we did, even though it was Biden who chose Ms. Harris, not the black community, and not those black women. They said you choose. It's well-meaning, and I get it, but it's divisive for black women to ever act like there are no black men, and to ever not actively invite black men into what they're doing so that black people can benefit from it. It looks good for black women to say, oh, we have all this power. But what it inadvertently feeds into is to the same split that I just finished talking to you about between us. Yeah. And there is an experience that's the black male experience that in some instances, that's demoralizing, confusing, traumatizing, that impacts...
Emasculating.
Emasculating, I will stick with that because that word fits. And the irony of it all is that we live in a society, I'm talking about black men now, we live in a society that's, quote, patriarchal, that values maleness over womenness, but interrupts black men's capacity to fully show up in all their powers. And so no one is looking at those, that's why Dr. Curry's work is so important. Look him up if you don't know who he is. It's important that black women understand that we need each other. Black men and women need each other. And you're being set up to be, and you're enjoying, because some of them are mad at black men. Some of them have some unresolved anger at black men. Some of them have come up with this phrase, male privilege, that they throw black men under in that category, which is a problem. Because if you're so privileged, why you keep getting murdered every 5 minutes in this country, and why are you the least to feel comfortable enough to be in the academy to stay, and why are you over incarcerated? Those are not the tenets of privilege. But we live in a society that only glorifies white maleness, but that constantly puts down black maleness. And now we have women who have learned to do things that put them on the side of white men. And everybody's ignoring black men and being rewarded. The black women are being rewarded for it. Just like BLM is not
another very distinct divide.
Yes, and like BLM, I believe that if BLM, which is problematic regardless, was led by strong black men, it wouldn't have got MSNBC coverage or ABC coverage or all that kind of stuff. So my point is that this uplift of women, and women deserve to be uplifted, but if they're uplifted away or in opposition to the black man, that's powerful. That's problematic. Let me get my P's right. That's problematic. That feeds into the same irony that I had to deal with when I met with these women in Virginia who were complaining about black men, and I said, but y'all raise them. Most babies spend most of their youth and development under the arms of women. So you're in a position, if you felt like it and had enough mental health to do it, to guide them to be great human beings who are men. Even if the man is not there, under the best situations, the man will be there. But if he's not there, you're in a position to guide this black boy into a strong, self-evaluating, powerful human being that's male. So some of what's going on with them has to do with some neglect from inside of our community, as opposed to the consistent white supremacist gauntlet of murder and mayhem that we all face, particularly black men. You understand what I'm saying?
I absolutely do. And as we wrap up, I want to ask you to be able to take us out on a train of hope, on a train of possibility. So we've examined here some of the gigantic issues and the traumas that we deal with. But as folks are looking in on their cell phone, on their laptop, perhaps some on their TV, some might just be listening, your words to those who might have heard us here and say, God damn, where do I go from here?
All right, well,
give us some direction.
Believe it or not,
you trans-breaker behavioral scientist, you.
Believe it or not, I haven't even touched the surface of all that I know and all that concerns me. and all that I know that we're up against as people of African descent in this society, and all the games and all of the horrific things that got us still choosing the white doll since the 1930s to this very day in terms of when our children are studied.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm still encouraged is because lying dormant under all that trauma is the potential for black power. We just got to break the trance. You know, dormant under the confusion and the anti-blackness and the N-word trauma and all those kind of stuff that's going on that keeps us paralysis. It's the capacity to be alive and awake and responsive to this stuff and resolving it. It's always there. And the reason I use the term trance breaking is because when we come out of the trance, and I am rewarded and excited to say that I've actually witnessed this. I'm not just talking to you in anecdotes. I actually get a chance to work inside of a methodology that I call critical thinking and culture affirmation, which is a trance-breaking methodology where we've worked with families and parents and individuals and men and women to do work to teach them to have a critical analysis, to come out of the trance, to see what's going on around them so they can see the slings and arrows of white supremacy mythology when they come and go, oh, I see that coming. Oh, I'm blocking. Instead of internalizing and go get a blonde weave, these people go, oh, wait, no, I see, oh, okay, I'm not having it. I'm not internalizing that. I see the myth from the facts. And I'm really, really abbreviating something that's very complex. But the bottom line is that I'm involved, and I know other people who are involved, in successful trance-breaking, black-affirming behavioral change that works. And that creates new leaders and new possibilities among black people. We just had a retreat at the Alkebulan Oasis and Retreat Center 3 weeks ago with a bunch of young black men who came there, some who are resistant, who are shut up with that black stuff, who are, I don't want to hear that, who by the third day were apologizing for their disrespect because they got it. So in the black community, we don't have an issue with intelligence. We don't have an issue with genius. We don't have an issue with greatness. We have an issue with awakeness and being out of the trance and learning how to be black affirmationists instead of black Trojan horses for white supremacy.
I'm envisioning a white man.
Really?
I'm envisioning a white man going through his phone, looking at different things of Facebook or YouTube, stumbles onto YouTube, and hears you articulate that lying dormant is a force that can be transformed in to black power. And I'm imagining him screaming, saying, oh my God. I'm imagining a black man recognizing, a black woman recognizing that power and bringing it to life and transforming our community and our place in this society in a much more magnificent, robust, living kind of way. And I'm imagining you keep on doing this work and keep on coming back to this show so that we can have this kind of conversation.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, brother, for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, God bless.
Appreciate it.
All right. Folks, that wraps us for today. Tune in the next time when we'll do our best to bring you our best and speak power, speak truth to power every time we sit at this table. Thank you.